Hi, I'm Maria Noel Groves, herbalist and owner of Wintergreen Botanicals in Allenstown, New Hampshire. Today we are going to make flower essences, and flower essences are kind of a different remedy than a lot of the other remedies that we make in my series. They're a lot more meditative, they're a lot more energetic, and they're not at all a chemical medicine like most of our other remedies that have an actual chemistry behind them that elicits their healing response. Flower essences are in contrast, they're very, very dilute. Chemically speaking, there's basically no bit of the actual plant material that we originally worked with in what you'll take in, and yet they have this really profound healing property to them, especially for working with our spirit, our mood, our also to some extent our physical health, and then especially our psychosocial spiritual health. So they're really nice because they're remedies that will get to things that most of our other remedies don't get to. And oftentimes I will use my flower essences in combination with other remedies. So for example, I will make a tincture blend for a client or for myself, and then I'll add a few drops of flower essence to that so that I get a whole nother layer of healing to my blend. And that's my favorite way of working with it, although a lot of flower essence practitioners work solely with flower essences and get really great results just from those. So first I want to kind of take a step back and sort of explain a little bit about what a flower essence is and what it's not. Sometimes people get really confused. When I used to work in natural food stores, people would come and they would see the little itty bitty bottles of flower essences lined up, and they would buy them. They would get lavender flower essence and rose flower essence, and then they would get home and they would be very disappointed because they didn't smell like lavender or rose or anything like that. What they thought they were buying were essential oils. Essential oils are very, very concentrated medicine. In contrast to flower essences, they're about as concentrated as you can get in herbal medicine, chemically speaking, and it's just those volatile essential oils of that plant. So it may take a lot of plant material that's included in just a little teeny tiny bottle. 16 pounds of rose blossoms, 16 pounds of lavender blossoms, and a whole ton of roses just make 1 ounce of essential oil. So they're often quite a bit more expensive, and when you open them up, they're very highly scented, and we use them in very, very low doses. Oftentimes we will dilute them in a carrier oil or something else because you can't usually put them directly on the skin, and they're usually for topical use only or for putting into the air. You can sometimes ingest really well-made essential oils of certain plants in very, very small quantities, but they can also be incredibly toxic. A quarter teaspoon of wintergreen essential oil, for example, can kill an adult if you ingest it. On the other hand, you could drink your entire bottle of a flower essence and you would be just fine. And then in between, we have our hydrosols or our flower waters, and those are made with a more modest amount, a decent amount, several cups of plant material, and you'll end up with a couple ounces of your hydrosol, and you can take that. It's got a little bit of the essential oil properties. It also, in a sense, if there are flowers that are present, has a little bit of the flower energy too, and you can use them for a wide variety of internal, external uses, aromatherapy, all of that. But flower essences, on the other hand, are really this sort of vibrational essence that we capture from the flower in its peak state of flowering. And a flower is really the pinnacle of being for a plant. It's the time at which it's in its greatest glory. We could kind of think of it as humans in their, late teens, early 20s, when they just have everything. The world is at their fingertips. Everything is amazing. And they are kind of their purest essence of what they will be. And so that is when the plants seem to, at least on a vibrational, energetic basis, have the most healing properties. For other parts of remedies, other kinds of remedies, other parts of plants, you might harvest them at different times. Like, for instance, I might harvest valerian root for medicine as a tincture. I might harvest that in the spring or the fall, but if I'm going to make a flower essence of valerian, I'm going to use the flower, and usually only the flower, ever the flower, and use the flower when it's just at its perfect state of blooming. You don't want to get them as they've gone by. And you always want to make sure that you're getting your flower essences from really happy, healthy plants. So we'll use those flower essences. We're going to dilute it down. We're going to preserve it in a combination of brandy and water, and then just take a few drops, and you'll see as we do it, you'll just take a few drops of that one mother essence and dilute it down into the stock essence, and then you can further dilute it down into the dosage essence, and you have a lot of great ways that you can work with it. So anything else, and there's no scent, and in these flower essences can be used externally, internally, in the air, really any way possible. There's no danger to using them. I suppose if you drank a whole bottle and it was a really big bottle, maybe you would get a little bit of a buzz, but even at that, there's not even that much alcohol in it. And So there are a lot of really great resources on flower essences. The whole theory of flower essences was originated by Edward Bach, Dr. Edward Bach in England. And there's still quite a bit of work being done over there. He has since passed on, but his work is still carried on. And so you'll find Bach flower essences sold in most stores. It's the most popular flower essence company out there, and it centers on 38 flower essences, oftentimes tree flowers, but also other flowers as well that grow in Europe. And so some of them are available to make here, some of them are not, like gorse doesn't grow here, so you would have a very difficult time making that here, but you can buy it. And you'll be surprised when you see what's actually in a flower essence. You'll be surprised that it costs maybe $15 for a little itty bitty bottle. And part of the reason the Bach essences cost so much is because they're being imported and that whole importation process. The actual act of making flower essence really isn't that expensive, and you'll find you can make your own homemade ones really, really well, really, really easily. So let's kind of back up a little bit more and talk about how does a flower essence work. And there are a lot of theories to this. It's a little bit more energetic, a little bit new agey, a little bit more woo-woo, and that may work for you or it may not. It's fine. And so the idea is that this flower is going to give you that vibrational essence, that vibrational healing property of the flower is going to come in and encourage the body to heal itself. And it's very similar to homeopathy. In homeopathy, we use very, very dilute remedies in order to elicit a healing response, but it's a little bit different in that we're not relying on poisons like you do in homeopathy, and that like cures like. In this case, we're really just looking at the flowers themselves, and you can get their uses from various sources. You can look at Edward Bach's work. In California and the West Coast, we've got the Flower Essence Society, and they have a line of products of flower essences that are available and some books that are available, and so you could refer to those. I studied with Christine Tolf at Lycanwood Herbals, who in turn studied with David Dalton at Delta Gardens, I believe is the name of his business. And so one of the things I like about working with Christine is that we work primarily with backyard essences. So they're plants that are in my yard that I've cultivated or grown wild, and working with those. So you can find a resource and look it up and see what that flower essence is used for, but you can also just use your intuition. In this type of remedy, it's really hard to go wrong because they're so diluted. You really aren't going to be poisoning yourself or anything like that. And so it's really very easy to just see what calls to you, what the plant tells you it's being used for, or what you feel like intuitively that it's being used for. So you may want to sit down, meditate with your plant for a little while, observe it. People go through a variety of techniques of ways that they come to use for that. And then when you take the flower essence, you might take it just as a few drops on the tongue or a few drops in water. When I combine it in a tincture, I will usually choose anywhere from 1 to 5 flower essences and add 1 to 5 drops of each to the whole tincture bottle, and then you'll use it however you would take the tincture. So there are a lot of different ways that you can use that flower essence. Some other ways that the flower essences might work, I like to think of it also as a little bit of intention, kind of like a ritual or a prayer, where in taking that flower essence for a specific purpose, you are kind of encouraging the universe, encouraging yourself, encouraging your mindset, however you want to look at it, to work towards that goal. So if let's say you're taking raspberry flower essence, which is a tricky one. That one is for forgiveness, and it's not always easy to forgive. If you're taking that raspberry flower essence and you're taking it on a regular basis, you're reminding yourself, every time you take that essence, you're reminding yourself that your goal is to forgive in whatever scenario it is, and that is going to help you. It's the creative visualization that's going to help you move along that path. Whether you're calling in the guidance of the flowers, whether you're calling in the guidance of a greater universe, or whether you're calling on your own abilities that are within you that you just have been having some difficulty with, I believe that that's the primary way that flower essences will work. But there is also a whole other energetic principle to them as well. Even if you don't know that you're taking a flower essence, like for example, some people will use flower essences for animals. The animals don't know that they're taking a flower essence, and you'll see dramatic differences in behavior of an animal that maybe was really needy, love me, take care of me, jumping on everybody, and then you give them a little bit of chicory flower essence, which is for not being quite so needy and having a little bit better sense of self. It can be used for people as well as animals, and the animal doesn't know that flower essences have been slipped into their water, and you'll notice a dramatic improvement in the animal's behavior, just kind of calming down and not being so needy for the attention and the reassurance. On the same token, a lot of times people will use rescue remedy or aspen, some different flower essences that are used for fright and fear and trauma and panic. And they might use them for an animal during a thunderstorm. And I have talked to people with animals who have seen their animals just do a complete 180 where they would be cowering, and then they get the flower essence and they're just standing there by the door watching the thunder and lightning storm with their owner with no issues at all. So I do think it's a little bit more than just your own belief in it, and that placebo effect perhaps. I think there's more to it than that. But even if it was just that, even if it was just a flower essence, you need so little, they're so easy, they're so inexpensive to make, they're such a joy to make. And I feel like whatever is going to help a person and not cause harm is the most important medicine of all. I would much rather turn to that first than turn to stronger medicines that might have some bad side effects, if just that belief in it working is going to be strong enough, although I do think it's more than just that. So some of the advantages of flower essences and some of the reasons why I really, really love them. One, they can get at different kinds of things than most remedies do. You can use them for things like fear and panic, for things like being really needy. You can use them for bringing joy to somebody. You can use them for deep healing on a deeper level, and just kind of that sort of concept level of deeper healing. You can use them for a lot of different things depending upon what the flower essence is being used for. For nightmares, sometimes you can use St. John's wort for that. So there are a lot of different things, and that sort of emotional, spiritual side of things that might be really hard to work on with other kinds of remedies, be them conventional or natural. Some other advantages of flower essences is because they are so gentle and so diluted, you can use them for people you might have a tricky time using other types of herbal remedies with. For example, really, really young children, babies even, older folks, maybe folks who are in the hospital, in comas, who are maybe using a lot of serious pharmaceutical medications, and you don't want to interact with that, especially on an emotional level. A lot of times people are on psych meds, and there are a lot of our psych herbs will interact with those psych meds. And so even if you can't use the herbs and the meds in combination to help that person feel better, you might be able to add some flower essences to the mix, and then also focus on nutrition and diet and make some really great improvements with that person without worrying about affecting the medications themselves. So there are a lot of different reasons. Also, because we're using very little plant material, and there are ways to make a flower essence without even harvesting any plant material, and you'll see about that in your notes. Because of that, it has very low impact, as opposed to essential oils on that other side, where you use lots and lots, pounds and tons of plant material. That has a very high environmental impact. That's a lot of monocropping, and that's a lot of harvesting being done. Whereas with the flower essence, it's basically negligible what is being harvested, and in some case, nothing is being harvested. If maybe you're making a lady slipper flower essence, and you just prop your flower essence bowl underneath the blossom and just leave it there, as opposed to actually cutting the blossom into the bowl. So there are a lot of different ways to work with it, and it has very little impact. There's an herbalist in the Adirondacks, Kate Gilday, and she makes a variety of sets of wild essences, and one of them is the at-risk native medicinals, and she does those without harvesting the plant material, and so you have this kind of really neat set of medicine without harming the plant populations in any way whatsoever. So in order to make our flower essences, we're going to kind of lay out our materials. We have our water. We're going to make the essence in water, so you can use any kind of pure filtered water, well water, but something that shouldn't hopefully go bad. Although we are going to add some alcohol to it to preserve it. Brandy tends to be the alcohol of choice. There are, if you want to avoid alcohol, Green Hope Farm in New Hampshire had some issues before DSHEA legislation got passed years ago. They had all of their products seized and were told they were selling liquor without a license. And this was before there was a little bit more protection for dietary supplement product makers. And so since then, they've started preserving theirs with the herb shiso that's extracted in vinegar. And so that's one way of potentially making a flower essence without using any alcohol at all. But for most people, they're going to use brandy. You could also try using vodka, but generally something kind of neutral. We tend to like brandy because it's a little bit more pleasant tasting. There's a little bit more something special with the brandy. And in this case, we're not trying to extract as much as we can from the plant. It's not that kind of medicine. We're just preserving it with the brandy. So we've got our water, We've got our brandy. I will also later on be using some already pre-mixed, so I do about 50-50. Some people will do maybe 30% brandy and the rest water. I usually do 50% brandy and the rest water, and we'll use that for making our stock and our dosage bottles. I learned from Christine it's handy to have them in these little squeeze bottles. You'll see as I fill it makes it just a little bit less to have to deal with while you're working with it. It is plastic though. You could do without it if you wanted to. You could just use a funnel. Then we've got our bottles to put things into. I've got a 4-ounce brown glass bottle for my mother essence, and then I have a 1/2 ounce blue glass bottle with a dropper top for my stock essence. And you can, if you're making a dosage essence, which is the next one down the line, you'll just use another blue glass dropper bottle. I have my bowl to make my flower essence in, and I use a clear glass that's pretty simple. In fact, this is what I also use for teacups and those kinds of things. So any just kind of plain glass container. You can also use maybe like a 4-ounce screw cap jar if you're going out and making essences out and about and you need to kind of keep it covered while you're bringing it back home to finish up the essence. You can just use those kinds of clear glass bottles. So like just something like a jar like this, except this jar actually happens to have something in it. You don't necessarily need, but it's handy to have a strainer. It's handy to have a funnel or something to pour into our little small bottles. A set of scissors is helpful, but not absolutely necessary, but helpful. Generally, when you're making flower essences, you usually don't want to touch the plant. That's kind of one of the rules of thumb. However, there are many ways of thinking about flower essences, and if you Google different videos of people making flower essences, you'll see subtle differences from one person to another. So I don't tend to get hung up on rules, but the idea is that if you don't really want your energy getting into the remedy. But on the flip side, sometimes your energy is part of the medicine, and in my case, I'm kind of okay with that. So I'll sometimes use scissors and sometimes I'll use my fingers. Whatever seems to be the least traumatic as I'm harvesting the plant to the plant is usually what I will do. You're also going to want to do some way, of course, everything should be clean from the get-go. And it doesn't have to be sterilized, but you could sterilize if you want to. But everything should be very clean. However, it's also good to spiritually and emotionally clean everything off. And it's also good to be in a good space yourself when you're making a flower essence. Generally speaking, it's not a good idea to make medicine when you're really angry or you have a headache or you're sick. For some, some are just biosecurity reasons that you don't want to get your germs in your remedy. But on a deeper level, you don't want that energy of being sick or angry or sad going into that medicine, unless perhaps this remedy is really just for you and you are seeking a remedy for that feeling that you're feeling. And so in that case, we might make an exception. It's like anything. There are exceptions to all the rules, but we have our basic guidelines to start with. So you can do different things. Some people will just rinse them under water and say sort of like a little saying like, I cleanse you of all things, both positive and negative, so that you may be suitable for the co-creation of flower essences. You could use salt water, which is generally believed to be very purifying. And what I use is a sage smudge. And so I will just take a little bit of sage. I have some sage that I harvested myself out in California, just some little pieces. I don't use a lot of sage, so a little bit will last me a very long time. And you'll just kind of wave that around. I also have a local grower that I purchased some of his white sage from as well. And so you can just kind of cleanse everything with that smoke while it's also physically already very clean. I have my little jar of something to say thank you to the plant. With all plant medicine, it's a good idea to express your gratitude at the end of making medicine, at the end of harvesting. You don't have to. You can still make good medicine without it, but especially with flower essences where energy is such a big part of the remedy, it is particularly important to express that gratitude, and gratitude is never a bad thing. So people will do different things. Some people will leave a hair, some people might sing a song, anything that feels like an appropriate method of saying thank you for that plant. And I have a little blend that I've made up of a ground powder of stinging nettles, oat straw, comfrey, cornmeal, holy basil, and white sage. So a combination of natural fertilizers and somewhat spiritual plants. And so I will sprinkle this on the plant because I am kind of a practical person. So part of me likes the idea of giving the plant a little bit of fertilizer. On a physical level, I think that's important. And then there are some kind of more emotional, spiritual aspects to it as well. So whatever feels comfortable for you. So we are going to take our glass. We're going to fill it about halfway with our water. And then we're going to go outside into the garden and we're going to actually harvest our plants. So I've got about 2 ounces is what I'm going for here, because I'm going to ultimately mix the final extract or the final flower essence water with 50-50 brandy. And so I have 2 ounces of water, 2 ounces of brandy, and it'll fill my 4-ounce mother bottle. That's the thinking there. So if you don't have the same size containers, just kind of make sure that you're about half of whatever bottle size you're working with. So you don't need, sometimes you'll see pictures of people making flower essences with these huge bowls. This little bit of water will make enough flower essence to last a lifetime. You'll see what I mean when we actually finish making our flower essence. So let's go head out in the garden. We've got some motherwort that's looking beautiful, and I think it's ready to make a little essence of that. And for that one, because the flowers are so teeny tiny, we're actually going to include some leaves in there as well. But for most of the time, we usually just use flowers. But for that one, we're going to do a little bit of leaves and flowers. So I'll meet you out there in the garden, and then we'll come back in here and finish up the essence in a couple more hours. So a couple minutes to you, a couple hours to me. See you soon. So to make a flower essence is actually very simple in the basic principles. You're just going to take your glass of water, and you may want scissors. Most people will say try not to touch the plant directly and try not to have your shadow cross the plant. However, it's not something that you need to be really hard and fast with. The idea is you don't want to impart too much energy onto the plant, but if you're in a good space, sometimes we consider our energy to be part of the remedy itself. So I might actually do it with my hands just to kind of keep it simple, but we've got our motherwort here, we've got teeny tiny flowers, and that's what we're going to make our essence with. And some people sometimes ask me, what part of the flower do I put into my glass? And it can be a whole spray of flowers, it can be just a few little ones. It's really whatever you're called to use that makes sense to you. But it is flowers that you want to be using, and you want to use flowers that are just starting to open or are open and perfect. You don't want to use flowers that have gone by. And then you're also going to want to, it's okay if you get a few leaves in, but really the main focus here is flowers. So I'm just going to take this motherwort here, and my prime flowers are right here in the middle actually. So I'm going to use my hands just because it's a lot easier that way. And I'm going to put a little sprig there, and then I'm going to put another sprig of flowers there. And so then once you've got your essence ready, you're going to want to put it in a spot where it will stay sunny for a couple of hours, usually maybe from like 10 o'clock in the morning until noon or until 2, however long it feels ready, but usually you don't want it to get covered up with the shade of the day. So put it in a sunny spot, or maybe put it near the plant itself, whichever makes the most sense to you. I'm going to actually put it over here on this rock. So we're going to move over here, and I have this little rock here that I like because it's just surrounded by the garden, and it stays sunny for most of the day until later in the afternoon, and it's a nice spot to let my flower essences sit. But any spot that works for you will work, and then we'll come back to it in a little while and bring it inside and actually complete the flower essence process. It can also be helpful while you're making your essence. You may, or just before you make your essence, you'll want to sit with your plant. You may want to meditate with it a little bit, or just kind of be with it, observe it. And after you're done, you should go and give a little bit of a thank you to your plant. And so I have a little bit of fertilizer that I'm going to put down later, and we'll be talking about that inside as well. So we'll meet back up inside in a few hours when we're ready to make the essence. So we're back. Our motherwort has been out in the sun for a couple hours, and it's just about time, it just sort of feels time to finish the process and complete our flower essence. So we've just got our flower essence in the jar here, and then we're going to take our mother essence bottle, and we're going to put a funnel or whatever you want to use. You could strain it, put it into a Pyrex container, and then pour whatever works best for you. And then it can be handy to have a strainer to kind of catch it. You can probably sometimes pull some of the material out right like that, but you might get a little bit of pieces and parts that don't quite get. I have a little bit of flower material in there. So just going to pour it carefully through the strainer into our mother essence jar. And so it's about half full. We're going to put the rest of it, we're going to use brandy, and that's our preservative. It's going to keep it from going bad. And this should keep for many, many, many years, at least 10 years, possibly longer. use our mother essence. So now it's all full. Put our lid on it. Succuss it. This is kind of an important part to flower essences as well as homeopathy, is in between each dilution, as you're combining things together, that you succuss it, which basically just means to shake vigorously. So you could just shake like this, but I really like to do it against the palm of my hand. And there's not really a particular amount of times that you need to do this. It's just until it feels good to you. It's also really helpful to make sure that you put a label on your jar, because otherwise, if you have several of these, there really is not, unless you're really in tune with your energies, it would be impossible to tell one flower essence from another. So I have my little label here. I just say that it's Motherwort and that it's in 50% brandy and that it was made today and that this is the mother essence. So I've got that on the jar there. And then I'm going to make a stock essence with it. And so that we're just going to put a base of water and brandy. You can use anywhere from 30 to 50% brandy and the rest of it water. I have a 50-50 blend. And it is already mixed up for me. So I'm just going to fill that up to the shoulder. So pretty much almost up to the top, but you're going to want to leave a little bit of shoulder because when you put the dropper in, it's going to displace some of the water and you don't want it squirting out. Then you're going to use the dropper to take a few drops. So every time you're going to do this, you're going to shake it a few times. So just wake everything up. So put 5 drops or whatever, however many drops you feel called to do, but 5 drops is kind of classic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Succuss it. Put your label on it. And I'm also putting on the stock label because this is the one that I'm going to be using the most, is the stock bottle. This is going to go into storage so when I run out I can make more, but most of this will be in a box separated with some cardboard, little cardboard dividers with a bunch of other flower essences. And so the stalks are what I actually keep out and what I'll use. Sometimes I'll just take them straight. For example, I can take a little drop or two right now. And personally, I like to put 3 drops on my tongue, but like I said, you can use it in a lot of other ways as well. And refer to your notes. There's a lot more detail in your notes that I'm not including in the video, but I'm giving you all the basics in the video. And another thing that I like to put on the label of the stock essence for easy reference and also just for giving you a little extra meaning is what it's being used for. And in this case, Motherwort is used for healthy boundaries. It's for helping people maintain a state of boundaries in difficult situations while still having a sense of emotional warmth. So it's really helpful. I use it especially for clients that are going through divorce or when families members have passed away and everybody else in the family is kind of fighting over this or that. Whenever there are kind of toxic things going on, but you still need to maintain a relatively good relationship. You can't just turn into a jerk or tell everybody else to go F themselves. You need to really still be an emotionally warm person, but it might be a trying time. So I'll use the Motherwort flower essence in blends for that, and it might have been in their anti-anxiety blend or their stress blend, and then I just put a few drops of the Motherwort flower essence. So I like to put on it that, so healthy boundaries. And it's important to keep your what you're using it for a positive thing. Sometimes it might be easier to remember when you're learning that this is for when toxic situations are happening and you don't want to become a bitch. But that's not really what you want to put on your label because that has a very negative connotation. You want to put the more positive aspects. So healthy boundaries, that's very positive. Sense of self as opposed to stop being a needy person. So you really want to have that positive thing that you're aiming for rather than the negative thing that you're trying to get rid of. That's really, I just think that's an important part of energetic remedies in general. And it's a good principle to apply to all kinds of remedies when you're making your medicine. So that is our stock bottle. If you wanted to make a dosage bottle, and that would be the bottle maybe that you might give a client or give to somebody else, you might mix a couple of flower essences together, make like a bouquet of flower essences for specifically geared to that person so they can take that on a regular basis. Then you would repeat that same exact process that we did to make the stock bottle. You would take 5 drops of the stock bottle, put it in the dosage bottle with the brandy water base and succuss it, and then that person could take that directly. But if you're a flower essence practitioner or you just make a lot of flower essences in your own life, you can also just take the stock bottle directly. So a lot of times I will do that. For me, because I'm often combining them into tincture bottles, my tincture bottle actually becomes the dosage bottle as opposed to making a separate one. So that's really pretty much it. There are lots of other things to flower essences, and like I said, refer to the notes because there is a lot more detail there, but I don't want to bore you with a really long video. I do want to kind of leave you with a couple of little extras and kind of hints of things that are in the rest of your notes. I do have a bunch of resources listed, one of which is the Flower Essence Repertory, which is one of the prime source books that you'll find that's out there. It's really useful, really great detail on using flower essences and information about additional detailed information about each essence. It is relatively specific to the Flower Essence Society's line, so if it won't have everything that's in your backyard, but it does cover a lot of different plants, as well as the Bach plants are covered in here. There's a guide that one of my colleagues, Carolyn Kelly, I don't know if you can see that from all the way there, but Carolyn Kelly at Herbal Energetics does a whole bunch of different products, including flower essences. So she has a guide that you can purchase for not very much money that gives a guide to some of the ones that she has worked with. And then Christine Tolf, this is probably my favorite resource, and I'm biased because I've studied with her, and obviously I like her style if I chose to study with her. But Christine Tolf at Lycanwood Herbals, formerly in New Hampshire, now in South Berwick, Maine, this is the book that I got as part of the program. However, she's very, very generous, and on her website where she sells her flower essences, she gives the basic descriptions for all of the ones that she sells, and she is one of my favorite. Her meanings of the flower essences just really resonate quite a bit with me. So you can just go online onto her website, just Google Lycanwood, Lycanwood, Lycanwood Herbals, and you'll find her website. Look at the flower essences, and she'll have 3 different pages sorted by alphabetical order of the different essences. And then if you still can't find the essence that you've chosen to make, if you want to look it up, as opposed to just relying on your intuition and whatever you get from your meditation with the plant, then you can just Google it. There are so many different flower essence practitioners out there on a small scale working with such a wide variety of plants that if you wanted to kind of cross-reference, get a little deeper understanding of the plant, you can Google it, flower essence, this plant, and see what other people have to say. And then you can take or leave it, because really, ultimately, it's what matters to you and what messages and experiences you're getting from that plant. Every plant is an individual. Even if you have lavender in one person's garden, it might be very similar, but not exactly to the lavender in another person's garden. You might have different varieties, but also even within the same exact species, there's going to be some variation. I mean, for people, all of us people, we are all the same species, but we're very different personalities. So if you find that what you read about for that plant doesn't resonate with the message that you get and the experience that you get taking it, then especially with flower essences, I would say really rely 100% on your own intuition, because that's what matters the most when it comes to working with those flower essences. Christine has a neat thing that she's done with some of her fellow herbalists, where she'll send out a flower essence every other month, and there's a group of people who will take that flower essence for a whole month, try to not learn what the essence is for, just take it and kind of experience blindly what kinds of things they experience from taking that plant, record dreams, any major changes that happen during that month, and then meditate at a specific time. Everybody meditates in their different places, but they meditate at the same time with that plant while taking that essence. And then we all send in our information. Christine kind of puts it together and looks for common themes, and then using her intuition as well as the information that everybody provides, she sort of creates her profile for that plant. And she'll also look to see what other flower essence practitioners who've used that plant say about it. So that's an interesting way of combining a little bit of the magic and a little bit of the science, or using a somewhat scientific method, and using those 2 methods together to come to the meaning of a flower essence. It's just whatever works for you. With most plant medicine, I would say that doing your research is really, really important. You want to make sure also that you're not working with a poisonous plant, this and that. But with flower essences, there's a lot more flexibility there because we're working with such safe remedies. Really, there's not much that could go wrong with taking a flower essence. If somebody had alcohol issues, they could be using it more as an aromatherapy spray or as a perfume, or they could try using the shiso vinegar preservative like they do at Green Hope Farm, so you can work around that one a little bit. If you are working with a really deadly poisonous plant, what you might do, and something that like a cup of tea might kill you. If just a cup of tea of that plant would kill you, you might want to do a slightly different technique where you take your cup of plant material and put it inside of another bowl that just has water in it, and then ultimately use the water outside of the original cup. And there's more details on that in your notes. So that would be one thing, but it's really unlikely to poison yourself with any herb with a flower essence. The one thing that can go wrong, but is a sign that you're on the right track, is resistance. Usually if a flower essence isn't going to work, it's just not going to work. But if it's the right remedy, but you're going to have a little bit of difficulty with making that change, for example, we'll bring back that raspberry and forgiveness. Sometimes we don't want to forgive. And so you might be taking that essence that's helping to nudge you in that direction. But you might still be resisting that change. You know you should, but you're not quite ready to. And you might feel kind of crabby. That's usually the main sign of resistance that people will get, is they just feel kind of crabby, mood swings. They feel really, really cool and everything's great, and then everything's, just kind of bipolar for a day or two. And usually that will pass. And that doesn't happen all the time. With most remedies, it's not an issue. But for those ones that are a little bit more of a challenge for somebody to make those changes, those are the ones where you might run into resistance. And it's not a bad thing. It means you're on the same track, on the right track. Just want to kind of take it slow, continue to take the essence for a few more days, and usually it'll pass. But generally speaking, you'll usually notice the positive effects of a flower essence, sometimes within seconds after taking the essence. And I always recommend, if you've made an essence, I was talking, so I didn't really experience it as much as I normally would, but usually after I've created a flower essence or co-created a flower essence, because we're creating it with the plant, we're not just creating it ourselves. Once I've co-created a flower essence, I'll just kind of stand and be in a present state and take a few drops of that flower essence and see how I feel. See if, sometimes with different essences I might feel a little bit more energy towards my hands or my head or my belly. You'll get some sense there. And then you may also just feel, either an opening and awakening or peacefulness, all different things. I also want to introduce you to just a couple of my favorite flower essences. There's so many. In your notes, I touch on a few of my favorites. There are even many more flower essences outside of that. But I have a couple that I grabbed from the garden that are perfect right now, and I just want to mention them. Not that you'll be able to see them really well in this video, but I just want to mention it. You saw this valerian in bloom behind me when I was making the Motherwort essence. Valerian is a classic herbal remedy for sleep using the roots. However, the flower essence has very similar uses. Actually, all three of these that I'm going to mention, their medicinal uses and their flower essence uses have quite a bit of overlap. That's not always the case. And with the valerian, it's used for deep peace, kind of like it's used for deep sleep on an herbal side of things. And a lot of times I will put it into sleep formulas. I will combine valerian tincture and valerian flower essences. And even for people who don't do well with valerian as a herb, as a traditional herbal remedy, I might still add just a little bit of flower essence with other relaxing herbs into a blend and see really, really nice results for that, for just helping people calm down. I use it in anxiety blends as well. A lot of times I use flower essences for their more physical with their emotional counterpart uses. So we've got the valerian there, also somewhat helpful for pain too. We have lavender, and these buds are just starting to come into being, and as it would actually open. If we're making medicine from lavender, we usually want the buds before they open, but if you're going to be making a flower essence, you might want it once a few of those flowers have actually opened up, and then you make your essence with those flowers as well as maybe a few buds as well. And so again, this one is very similar to its medicinal use. We use lavender for spiritual calm. It's a little different from deep peace, but very similar. I actually use these two together a lot. They're kind of friends in my mind. And so I will use that for both pain, at moments of spiritual crisis. Occasionally people will be having that. They're not coming to me for their spiritual crisis because that's not my shtick as an herbalist. However, they might be having a spiritual crisis and it's affecting other aspects of their life. And since I can get a sense of that, I may refer to them to other places for deeper help, but I can at least put a few drops of lavender flower essence into their formula for whatever help that might give. And that's kind of my take on flowers. They can't hurt, and they really might help, and oftentimes they do help. Then we have one of my absolute favorites. This one is comfrey flower essence. And again, lots of overlap here with its medicinal use and its flower essence use. As a medicinal, we use the leaves and the roots for really fast healing, especially topically. There's some controversy about using it internally. whole nother ballgame. Not going to get into that one today. However, as a flower essence, we use the flowers for deep healing. And that can be from something physical. It can also be from something emotional or spiritual. Christine Tolf has some pretty impressive stories of people who saw dramatic turnarounds in brain injuries relating to car accidents and those kinds of things when people started taking comfrey flower essence because of its deep healing actions. And I've also seen really great results in people with some pretty serious pain. I use flower essences a lot with my pain clients and my clients that have nervous system issues, and see really, really good results with it. And I'm usually combining it with herbs that are also supportive. So those are just a few of my absolute favorites. There are many, many more. In some cases, their flower essence use does not really relate at all to their medicinal use. So as you'll get to know the plants, you'll get a little bit more of a sense of them there. But I hope you really enjoy working with flower essences. They're a whole nother layer of working with plant medicine. We've got the science, we've got the folk, we've got aromatherapy. We have all these sorts of aspects of working with plants. And now you also have this flower essences energetic level, and it just brings a little bit deeper meaning. You can start making flower essences really early in the season as soon as those first spring blossoms pop out. So I have a lot of spring flower essences, and then when summer hits, I get a little bit more overwhelmed, and I'm not always in the right place to make a lot of summer essences. But you can work with them throughout the whole season. As long as you've got happy flowers, you can make happy flower essences. So enjoy, happy herbal adventures, and we'll see you next time. Take care.